Well, I'm going to keep going with these recordings because when I started this manifesto last year, it was intended to be a journal mostly comprised of new music. But then when this came along, everything came to somewhat of a standstill, and I think that's probably been the case with everyone who was involved in some sort of project when this struck. Everyone has been forced to down tools. Some people, though, of course, have had the opportunity to focus on creative pursuits because of the isolation, which is a positive out of this. But I'm treating it differently and the opposite way because I've worked in the creative world for the majority of my life. I've always been looking at this other side of the world and society, and this to me at the moment is far more important than any creative pursuits which can be returned to once this is resolved, if it ever is. But it's important that we do resolve it, because if we don't, creativity as it once was will no longer exist. Art as it once was will no longer exist. Another consequence of the Second World War was that many forms of art were outlawed. They were prohibited because they were provocative. They caused people to consider things that they normally might not have, and it also encourages rebellion to an extent, at least independent thought. Art is often controversial, and the establishment doesn't like that. Throughout history, certain forms of art have been outlawed, they've been prohibited. And the Second World War was one example of that, one extreme example of that, but we potentially are moving into something similar, if not more extreme. At the moment, it seems like fun because everybody can stay inside and do their arts and crafts. All these people are discovering, these newly acquired talents, which are latent in everybody, but people are so distracted by their jobs that they don't have the opportunity to pursue these creative inclinations otherwise. But it won't last. And also, things like arts and crafts, basic expressions of creativity are not controversial, and so they will be permitted in this new system. Anything that does not threaten the narrative will be permitted, but it will be largely devoid of substance. It will not be challenging or thought-provoking. This is the world that we're entering into. This is the world that we're being forced into. Making these recordings is surreal because it's, I feel like Sarah Connor in the Terminator movies, leaving messages for the future. Someone one day, whoever, may listen to these recordings and have a better understanding of what happened when all of this was transitioning, what the world was like before this change, because it really does seem like we are moving into a world that is going to be completely different to what has been known, and new generations of people will not have any understanding of what the old world was, or the amount of freedom that people had, or the ability that they had to express themselves, to truly express themselves creatively. These are things that are going to be stolen from future generations, but they won't even be aware that they've been taken, because all the information and all of the evidence of the existence of a different civilization will be removed over time. And that will be because the rulers of the new system will not want those generations to desire these fundamental human rights and this spectrum of emotion that will be eliminated in this process. The virus is really incidental to all of this. Whether or not it is real, whether or not it is as deadly as what is being reported, it doesn't matter, because it's not the focus of this exercise. It could be another threat. It could be any form of threat that would affect the global population that can be used as a catalyst to usher in a new world order. That term has been criticised as being a conspiracy term, but it is and has been used by governments. George W. Bush explicitly used that term during his presidency. This has been the plan of the elite for decades and decades and decades. People are starting to ask questions, and they're noticing inconsistencies in the narrative that the media is portraying. If people have concerns about the narrative, then they need to directly challenge it. They need to form groups or act individually and challenge the narrative by asking questions. People don't need to rely on the media to ask questions. Governments are working for the people. They work for you and for me, for every citizen. Every politician, every agent of law enforcement, every soldier is an employee, in a sense, of yours. You are in a superior position of power to these agents who are employed to defend your interests. It is their duty to defend your rights and your safety as a human being. This is the only function of government or any of these agents. It is the singular function. So this also applies to the media. The media consists of people who are employed to investigate current affairs around the world and report back to the people. Supposedly they are asking the questions on behalf of the people. So, as a society, we know, and one of the fallouts from the 2016 election was that we know that the media has been ingenuine. They have been untruthful. They've lied to the population in ways that are unforgivable. They are such monumental lies of such proportion that citizens can no longer rely on the media to report information that has any integrity whatsoever. So people need to directly ask these questions themselves. And if enough people ask the questions, and if they ask them in the right way to the right organisations, then those organisations will have a duty to respond to the people. If people approach this in a way that is aggressive, that is rude and uninformed, the organisations have no obligation to respond. But if people do this in an organised way and a calm, collected way, essentially approaching this as a journalist would, as a profession, then hopefully some answers will start coming through, or at the very least, people will form a picture of the actual truth. If legitimate questions are being asked and they are consistently rejected, then people have cause for concern and they have every right to contest that. Eventually, if people keep doing this and the response is just consistent rejection on behalf of the governments and other organisations in terms of delivering information or disclosing information, then that gives cause for people to demand that members of these organisations step down. They are replaced with people who are willing to interact and engage with the public. There are all sorts of steps that can be taken to separate the dependency of the people from the governments. Governments may still exist, but the people need greater control over those who are in power. It should not be the other way around. People should not be spoken to as if they are imbeciles or governments should not be addressing adults as if they are children, and that is exactly what has been happening in this lockdown. People are being spoken to as if they're stupid. And that's not a way to govern people. People need to have greater control over those who have been in control of their lives for far too long. This has to change at this time. It is ready to change. We can either go down the path of no resistance, which means that we have this new order. This is the life that we will have to accept, where forms of creativity and expression as they previously were will be eliminated. We'll be living in a slave-like condition, sedated, not capable of challenging the system, even if we desired to, or desired it. So people need to be organised, and they need to do this in a calm, considered way. But there are questions. There are lots of questions about why this is happening, the truth of the matter, the nature of the threat, the extent of the threat. And many, many more questions that remain outstanding. The game that's being played at the moment is just one of delay. It's just delay and distraction. It will just keep being extended. The lockdowns will continue. They will keep finding reasons to extend, because the intention is that the lockdown transitions into a slightly less restrictive, totalitarian state. It will have the appearance of being less restrictive, but actually will be more intensely restrictive in terms of what you can and cannot say, what you can and cannot do. There is not much time left to prevent this from occurring. So if people want to hold on to their humanity, if they want the world to remain as it was, in the sense that people had the freedom to speak and act in ways that are reflective of true liberty, which is an inalienable human right. They have to act now. They have to use their brains and their wits and their spirit to stand against what is coming. and it is bigger than anything that humanity will have ever faced in thousands of years. This whole cycle may have happened before with other civilizations, but we just don't have the records. We don't have detailed or accurate records about what happened, why those civilizations ended. But we know that something big came along and something dramatic happened to put an end to them. And we're not far from that now. You can either sit idly by and let it happen, or at the very least speak up against it, because freedom of speech still exists, and it may not exist for much longer. So that's why I'm continuing with these recordings. The quality is not great of these recordings. I am simply going about my business and recording my thoughts. Because if people don't, everything will be lost. This is a time to document for the benefit of people in the future, and hopefully to prevent the future from becoming something that is unimaginable to most. But for the ones of us who do know what that world would look like, it's enough to stand against. It's a call to action. Not violence, but at least political and philosophical. So that's it for today. Enjoy your Easter, and I'll make another recording soon.